Welcome back to India Today Global. An important visit to New Delhi. India announced the restoration of its technical mission in Kabul to a full-fledged embassy, reopening the facility closed since 2021 after the US withdrawal and Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, signaling deeper diplomatic ties with the Taliban dispensation. India pledged increased support in health, education, trade, sports and refugee assistance, including gifting ambulances and plans to build shelters for Afghan refugees from Pakistan and Iran during Foreign Minister Muttaqi's visit to New Delhi.
In a major shift in India-Afghanistan policy, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar met Afghan Taliban Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi. This marks the first high-level diplomatic engagement between India and Afghanistan after the Taliban took over in 2021. During the bilateral meeting, Jaishankar announced that India will reopen its embassy in Kabul, strengthen ties with Afghanistan, and extend support for the country's development.
India is fully committed to the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence of Afghanistan. Closer cooperation between us contributes to your national development as well as regional stability and resilience. To enhance that, I am pleased to announce today the upgrading of India's technical mission in Kabul to the status of Embassy of India.
He further emphasized that both countries must stand united against cross-border terrorism.
We have a common commitment towards growth and prosperity. However, these are endangered by the shared threat of cross-border terrorism that both our nations face. We must coordinate efforts to combat terrorism in all its forms and manifestations.
Muttaqi, in response, assured that Afghanistan will not allow any anti-India activity on its soil, calling cross-border terrorism a recurring menace.
We always sought good relations with India. We will not allow groups to threaten anyone else or use the territory of Afghanistan against others.
Their joint condemnation of cross-border terrorism came amid reports of Pakistani airstrike in Kabul earlier today, targeting Pakistani Taliban leader Noor Wali Mahsood. Muttaqi also thanked India for providing humanitarian aid during Afghanistan's time of crisis and expressed support for India's Chabahar port project, which was sanctioned by the US President Donald Trump.
Keeping in mind the issue of Chabahar port, we are hopeful. Both India and Afghanistan are determined to sort the issue. Amid the sanctions imposed by US, both of our countries will be in dialogue with US. The issue remains top priority for India and Afghanistan.
While ties between Kabul and New Delhi are improving, India is yet to formally recognize the Taliban government in Afghanistan. Both countries also refrained from displaying their flags during the bilateral meeting. With Neha Kumari, Bureau Report, India Today.
Joining me now is Ambassador Amar Sinha, former Indian diplomat or envoy to Kabul. Ambassador Sinha, thank you so much for joining me here on the network. You were ambassador to Afghanistan when the very same Taliban were on the other side of the fence. Your first reaction to India's engagement, growing engagement, and the need to engage the Taliban, even when the terms and conditions for New Delhi are very clear, women's rights. And I will have to ask you on how journalists like us were barred from attending Muttaqi's press conference.
Good evening. Yes, actually, I've seen when they were actually fighting NATO forces in 2013 to 2016. And they took control in 2021 when the then Afghan government sort of abdicated and the president fled. Since then, of course, they have settled down. And clearly, after 4 years, there is a realization that they're there to stay. Also a realization that they are eventually Afghans and they're trying to unite a country and run a country in the best way that they can. There are many gaps, whether it's about women, the diversity, etc. But we have not taken a very ideological position on this. It's a very practical, people-centric decision, given our historical connections. And I think this was a decision of his visit, at least, was just a progression of what one has seen since 2022 June, when we opened the technical mission. And then there have been contacts at different levels, including at the Foreign Secretary, and two conversations at the EM level. And about your being banned, I didn't know about this. First, I didn't even know that he was having a press conference. Uh, and I'm quite surprised because, in fact, we did interact with him. I just happened to be in Kabul a month ago with a group which included at least 4 ladies. It's a Track 2 regional initiative. And Foreign Minister had very nicely received all of us in the office and even hosted us to a dinner. So I'm quite surprised that who took this decision and why. But this is something which perhaps I hope you all had flagged to MEA, because I think it was in the Afghan embassy, right?
Absolutely. Afghan soil, Afghan embassy, but yes, the MEA is now in the know of what really transpired and happened. The larger question over here, Ambassador Sinha, we're looking at a very big announcement. On the one hand, Muttaqi saying with changing geopolitics and changing relations with Pakistan that anti-India activities will not be allowed on Afghan soil. On the other hand, India now saying that we're going to reopen embassy in Kabul. How important do you think these decisions sit in the current context?
These are important decisions. What he has said about Afghan soil not being used also has been a constant in terms of the Afghan policies, whether this government or the previous government. This they have said from day one. Then, of course, they had also very openly supported us when the Pahalgam attack took place. Opening of the embassy, we already had the embassy. We had reopened what we had called a technical mission.
Yes.
But now we want to call it an embassy. Though still not an ambassador. So that means there is no diplomatic recognition as yet. But this will be a step towards normalization, greater access to different levels of the regime, perhaps a much larger presence there, which will help you because, I also noticed that Foreign Minister joint statement had a whole slew of activities and projects that we are going to do. So I guess you'll need manpower, you'll need greater coordination with the local authorities. And that is what is being planned. So it's a good decision. And I guess, not everybody may agree with this in terms of ideology. I think it's a very practical thing, which looks at India's geopolitical interest, security interest, and importantly, the humanitarian needs of Afghanistan, which are dire.
Do you think this will also lead to recognition sooner than later?
Well, eventually, yes. I guess that is what Taliban government or any government would like, that it gets recognized and it gets integrated in the region. And since I told you about the regional group that I'm working with, I think I get a sense that most of the regional partners are sort of leaning towards integrating Afghanistan with the region rather than isolating them or castigating the regime.
Okay.
So perhaps we are also looking at influencing them so that they moderate many of the policies which many find very difficult to accept.
Right.
And also that they broad base their power base and legitimacy.
Right. Ambassador Sinha, stay on with us. There's another very strategic issue on which both now see eye to eye. India has backed Afghanistan on the Bagram airbase issue, raising questions if this move will unsettle U.S. President Donald Trump amid growing India-U.S. tensions. Here's a report.
As Afghanistan's Taliban Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi arrived in India, a series of explosions and bursts of gunfire rattled Afghanistan's capital, Kabul. The cause of the blast and details on the casualties remain unclear. Reports suggest the blast may have targeted senior TTP leaders, including its chief Noor Wali Mehsood. Soon after the incident, speculation flooded on social media alleging Pakistan's involvement. However, the Taliban has not leveled any accusations so far. The incident comes amid worsening ties between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Since the Taliban came to power, Islamabad has accused Kabul of providing safe haven to armed groups, particularly the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, which Pakistan blames for attacks on its security forces. Pakistan, once a key backer of the Afghan Taliban, now appears to be distancing itself from Kabul as the Taliban government attempts to reset its foreign policy and rebuild ties with India in pursuit of international recognition. Earlier, Pakistan's Defense Minister Khwaja Asif accused Afghanistan of betraying Pakistan despite receiving benefits.
जिस मट्टी में से उनको फायदा मिल रहा है, जिस मुल्क से, जिस सरजमीन से उनको फायदा मिल रहा है, उस मुल्क के साथ दुश्मनी कर रहे हैं। सर, ये अब बर्दाश्त नहीं होगा। हमें यकसू होके मिनहसुल कौम जो है जवाब देना पड़ेगा इन लोगों को जो उनको पनाहगाहें मुयस्सर करते हैं, चाहे वो हमारी सरजमीन पे हैं या वो अफगानिस्तान की सरजमीन के ऊपर हैं। इसमें किसी को कोई शक नहीं होना चाहिए।
These developments follow India's decision to support Afghanistan's stance on the Bagram airbase after US President Donald Trump suggested reclaiming the base and warned Kabul of consequences if it refused.
We'll see what happens with Bagram. We're talking to Afghanistan. It should have never been given up. It was the most embarrassing day in the history of our country. There was no reason to give it up. I was leaving Afghanistan. I was leaving. I was the one that got it down to 5,000 soldiers, but we were going to keep Bagram, the airbase. We gave it up for nothing. There was no reason to give it up. We weren't going to leave Bagram.
Afghanistan, however, strongly opposed President Trump's proposal, asserting that not even 1 meter of Afghan land will be given to the Americans. Somebody asked if the United States engages with you or recognizes you, will you give Bagram in return or not? Not even 1 meter of Afghan land will be given to the Americans. What's drawing attention now is India's backing of Afghanistan at a time when India-US relations are strained, following Trump's tariffs on India over Russian oil imports. The question remains, will India's stance further rattle Trump? While New Delhi supports Afghanistan's stance over Bagram, it still hasn't recognized the Taliban government. The question persists, is India on the right or wrong side of history? India maintains that human rights, especially women's rights, remain central to its conditions for recognizing the Taliban government in Afghanistan, stressing the need for an inclusive government that ensures women's participation in public life. With Neha Kumari, Bureau Report, India Today.
Now, no women journalists were present in the press conference that was held by Afghan Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi at the Afghan Embassy in New Delhi. Women journalists were not invited by the Taliban official. I myself was one of them. Meanwhile, there was also a flag row at the Afghan Embassy during the press conference of the Afghan Foreign Minister. The embassy staff, who were there from the erstwhile regime, did not want Muttaqi's Taliban team to place the Islamic Emirates white Islamic flag and wanted the older Afghan flag to continue remaining there. After an argument, they removed the flagpoles from the press conference room. Their argument was that the Indian government has still not recognized the Taliban flag and therefore they will not let it be placed behind the Afghan Foreign Minister. Pranay Upadhyay, my colleague, joins me. We also have Ambassador Amar Sinha continuing to be with us. Pranay, women not allowed? We tried very hard, but it does seem like they brought their rules from Kabul to New Delhi.
This is really bizarre to notice there, Geeta, because in my over 20 years of reporting in Delhi and in my 25 years of journalism career, I have never seen such kind of segregation or such kind of press conference where there is a gender segregation that only on the basis of gender people were allowed. However, this was the Taliban thing, and as you pointed it out, it was Afghan embassy, Afghan soil, and that's why they were dictating the rules. However, as far as the press conference is concerned, there were questions about the women right there. There were questions about that, will Taliban be giving more visas to women to study in India in the case of increased visa quota there. You mentioned about the flag issue, the flag row. Definitely, it happened before us, and we were there in the embassy, and we saw some of the embassy officials and of the embassy employees who were posted by the erstwhile government, fuming in the situation. However, the Taliban government or the Taliban government representative Amir Khan Muttaqi were pretty cool there, and the departing statement, before leaving the embassy premises, Amir Khan Muttaqi said that this embassy belongs to the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. So that was
Right.
his last statement, and it was a very telling statement because he got an assurance that now onwards, Afghanistan, Taliban regime can place their diplomats in Delhi in this embassy. But this remains a dilemma because so far there is no official recognition. However, there are substantive steps in towards making a full recognition, as Ambassador Sinha also pointed it out. There are track to negotiations. There are negotiations, official and formal engagements as well. And there is an incremental approach. There is a gradual improvement in India-Afghan engagement as well as India-Afghan ties.
Right. Ambassador Sinha, if I could rope you in. Complicated and multi-layered relationship over here. They'll have to walk a tightrope on many issues. Now, it's the Afghan embassy and the flag issue. They're still not decided. We saw no flags in the official bilateral meeting as well, only because I suppose there was complication with regards to the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan flag. That's the Taliban flag. These complications will happen and will keep recurring.
Yes, that it will. But of course, I think the Taliban also is practical. That is why you see that the main flag post outside the embassy, which has the national flag, it still carries the old flag. They still allow the Afghan cricket team to play under the old Afghan flag. So they have been flexible. They have been using the Republic of Afghanistan passport for all the people. So these are practical considerations. I guess, on his table, he wanted his Taliban flag, which is also, Taliban was also a political party, a force, of course, which has now become their national flag. So yeah, these things they would resolve. The problem with this embassy of earlier officials and the current official, the fact is that he is visiting here as Foreign Minister of Afghanistan. And obviously, the embassy, his writ will run. Now, I don't think there should be any quarrel. There will be certain ground rules that the government of India would have laid down in terms of the recognition, how many number of people who will come or who will stay. And those, I guess, they would respect. But within that, I guess, government of India will not interfere in what happens internally in the embassy. About women, as I told you, I'm quite surprised. Why this happened? Because they were, as I told you, they were not only there was an Indian, there was a Pakistani, two German ladies we had all met him. So maybe a press conference, they have a separate protocol. But I hope the Indian journalists who were there asked him directly this question, because he also needs to know that apparently this had happened. So maybe your colleague can throw some light whether the male journalists who were there asked that question and what response did he give.
Well, Pranay, was the response as to why we weren't allowed?
Unfortunately, there was no direct question regarding, why the women journalists are not invited, because as I told you earlier as well, Geeta, that he, kind of abruptly ended the press conference because he said that I have some prior commitment. And before we could get, the first round of the question, not everyone got a chance to ask question. And we thought that this will go a bit longer, and we would, ask these questions. But he ended the press conference, though he was there, he was around, but with his officials and with his team. But he ended the press conference and then he left the embassy premises. But Ambassador Sinha is here, Geeta. I'm curious that what will happen to the India's case regarding the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2593, which explicitly mentioned about the women right and plight of women. And this resolution was passed during the presidency of India in United Nations Security Council.
I guess I'm not we are not abandoning that resolution, and all resolutions stand like the various 1267 and various committees. And I guess the call that government would have taken, that it is perhaps better to engage with them and impress upon them, and and at times you can change behaviors also through example. So if more people come here, they would realize that what Indian women have achieved and what they can. And if they can actually allow Afghan women to pursue education either online, or they let them come out to India, because in Afghanistan, unfortunately, higher education is not possible right now.
Right.
So, but these are socio-cultural issues that they will have to resolve, because you see, this is uh, because this is creating friction within the Afghan society and within the regime, as far as I can see.
Right. Ambassador Sinha, Prana actually had asked the question to Muttaqi on whether if they'll allow women to come to India on the same exchange program or the programs for higher education. Having said that, India could be at loggerheads with America yet again on the Bagram base. Strategically speaking, right now, it works in our favor to engage Afghanistan the way we're doing. But in the long run, are we on the right side or the wrong side of history when it comes to America?
See, I don't even know whether President Trump is serious about Bagram and what he has said, because he also wants Greenland, he wants Panama Canal, he wanted to change the Gulf of Mexico, which he did change. So I don't know whether Bagram is just another one of his kite flying statements, because it was only what 6 years, 4 years ago, that eyes wide open. It was under his presidency that Zalmay Khalilzad negotiated the Doha agreement, which was an agreement on withdrawal. And that very clearly stated that Taliban will not accept even one foreign military presence on their soil. Now, of course, in his statement, he says he brought it down to 5,000. If I recall correctly, just before he left office, he had brought it down to 3,500, which was not even sufficient to protect Bagram. In fact, if you remember, when they thought of the final withdrawal, just to protect the airport and the route as well as Bagram, first they had to reinduct over 9,000 soldiers back into Afghanistan after drawing it down to 3,500. So obviously, this sort of a flip-flop policy. He, of course, blames others, but he and his last administration needs to take some responsibility on that confusion.
Right.
As far as acceding to the demand, I think it will be a suicide for the Taliban government, which has fought 20 years basically to get foreigners out of Afghanistan. And even if the leadership was inclined to let them have, which Americans actually only in 2014, the biggest achievement was the signing of the bilateral security agreement with the Afghan government. President Ghani government's first act in 2014 September was to sign and give rights to 7 bases in U.S. In Afghanistan for 20 years.
Right.
So I don't know
in fact,
why
Foreign Minister Muttaqi himself made it very clear that if they want, they can come as diplomatic missions. Certainly, men in uniform from foreign countries will not be allowed. Ambassador Sinha, Pranay Upadhyay, thank you so much for joining us here. Now, China has reportedly asked India to provide guarantees that heavy rare earth magnets imported from China will not be re-exported to the United States before shipments begin. Beijing wants these magnets, critical for sectors like electric vehicles and defense, to be used exclusively for India's domestic needs. It is reportedly seeking export control assurances similar to those under the Wassenaar arrangement, which governs the trade of dual-use technologies among its 42 member countries. Although India is a Wassenaar signatory and China is not, Beijing wants India to follow comparable end-use certification rules. Indian firms have already submitted end-user certificates confirming the magnets will not be used to produce weapons of mass destruction. So far, New Delhi has not agreed to China's export control demands. U.S. Ambassador designate to India, Sergio Gore, begins his visit to India along with Michael Regis, Deputy Secretary for Management and Resources. He will travel to India from October 9th to 14th and meet Indian government counterparts to discuss wide-ranging issues between India and the United States of America. His visit, coming just days after his confirmation by the U.S. Senate, takes place amid ongoing bilateral tensions between the two countries over tariffs and increased H-1B visa fees. Also, there could be a likely meeting between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi on the sidelines of ASEAN in Malaysia end of this month. A day after Israel-Hamas agreed to first phase of a peace plan, ceasefire agreement came into effect. Thousands of Palestinians were seen returning to their homes after the Israeli military confirmed the ceasefire and said the troops were withdrawing to the agreed-upon deployment lines. The announcements came after Palestinians reported heavy shelling in northern Gaza. Earlier, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office announced that Israel's cabinet approved President Trump's plan for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, the release of all remaining hostages and of Palestinian prisoners. The statement said that the cabinet approved the outline of a deal to release the hostages without mentioning other aspects of the plan. Meanwhile, U.S. officials said that 200 U.S. troops already based in the Middle East will be moved to Israel to help monitor the ceasefire in Gaza. The U.S. military will establish a multinational task force in Israel known as a Civil Military Coordination Center, which is likely to include troops from Egypt, Qatar, Turkey and the UAE. That's all in this edition of India Today Global. Keep watching the network for all the latest news and updates. Goodbye and take care.